Welcome to Sustainability Now, solutions to shape a world that works. Designed for everyone interested in responsible stewardship of the planet, covering food, energy, housing, water, waste, health, economics, and consciousness. Welcome to your community, Sustainability Now, with your host, Scott Billy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Billy, and today I'll be your host on Sustainability Now. And I'm really happy to be joined by Joe Luttwak, the CEO and co-founder of Lingrove, as well as Blackbird Guitars, who are doing some really cool stuff in the carbon negative fiber arena. So, Joe, welcome aboard.
Thanks so much. Yeah, really excited to be here, and big fan of what you guys are doing on this podcast. So we're really thrilled to be sharing our vision here today.
Awesome. Can you start by giving a brief what Lingrove is for our listeners who haven't heard of you yet?
Sure. So Lingrove takes fast-growing plants. Think corn and flax and hemp and materials like that, and transforms these rapidly renewable plants into high-performance panels for built environments, so for buildings and architecture, and for applications beyond like transportation.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really cool topic. And I wanted to kick it off by getting a little into your background on how you got started down the road of sustainability and the steps you took along the way before you got to Lingrove.
Yeah, so it's been a long journey for sure. And so I'll do my best to make it, fairly concise. But Lingrove is really the culmination of my life's work to date. The idea really was initially, my interest was in conservation and in how to use market forces to help promote conservation interests. So, conservation being, protecting lands, biodiversity, public spaces, but also really the environment in the sense of forests and wildlands in general. And so I worked in that sector, and then thought that the NGO space, which is where I was working, is really has its place, but that I thought that maybe having a much more let's say customer-driven approach, where we get customers to make the right choices versus perhaps the ones that are worse for the environment, would be a very powerful thing to explore. I studied design to be able to use design, and then spun out a guitar company that was challenging the rainforest wood used to make musical instruments, and that grew out of my design education, so product design, where we were just as a kind of a group there thinking, how do we reinvent the music industry in such a way that people would buy instruments that didn't require rainforest wood from the Amazon, which is increasingly regulated, or even just wood from Alaska. And so I'll pause for a second, but that company is called Blackbird Guitars. I have one here today. We can check it out later. And we created our Ekoa material, a kind of natural carbon fiber, to replace the wood used in musical instruments. And that's kind of how this journey got started for us here at Lingrove, is making high performance wood replacement in the music industry, and then thinking, well, this industry loves what we're doing. How can we scale our impact? How can we really make a difference? Not just, tip of the iceberg thing, but make a difference for, large amounts of carbon sequestration. It's basically the idea of scaling up our technology for big impact. And that meant the built environment and transportation.
Yeah. So the the product itself is really more of a carbon fiber replacement than a wood replacement. If you look at them side by side and how they are made and formed, rather than, the subtractive, take a big piece of wood, carve it down to the thing you want. You're more making sheets and using a binder to create a panel of sorts, or a musical instrument or whatever.
Yeah. So I am, self-admittedly a composites nerd, right? Carbon fiber is a composite. Other famous composites that people know would be like fiberglass or Kevlar. And these are very, very high strength to weight materials, much stronger than steel, for instance. And incidentally, wood is also, the old growth wood is also higher strength to weight than steel. And so I think, understanding a sort of baseline of composites, because they still are kind of an obscure category. I'd like to tell people to think of, it's kind of a weird analogy. If you ever have gotten glue in your hair, how it becomes way stronger and more rigid. Effectively, horn is hair, as nasty as that might sound, and it's very rigid. So that's what composites are. We're taking all these fibers and having them act together, not as individual fibers, but as a complete, in our case, a laminate, by putting them inside a matrix, inside a resin. In our case, our resins come from fast-growing plants. Our fibers come from fast-growing plants. And so unlike carbon or fiberglass, we don't have to throw a lot of energy at our process, which makes those materials way worse for the environment than even metals, as far as a carbon embodiment, energy embodiment as well. And we can use lower cost inputs, so lower cost process, lower cost inputs. And, at the other end, have something that is performance like a high performance composite. So has incredible strength to weight, durability, resistance, all the stuff to survive everyday life, which can be pretty hard on our materials and products, but without any of the energy intensive components that go into making a composite typically, right? So we grow our fibers instead of effectively superheating super glue, which is what carbon fiber is in many cases. And when we say superheating, we're talking about 2000 degrees Celsius. So the amount of energy that typical composites have is really, I know I'm emphasizing it, but really is through the roof. And that's what makes this so exciting, is that we can do create outcomes similar to composites outcomes. So really, really robust products that last, like heirloom products or heirloom interiors, but without compromising the materiality and using these energy intensive, carbon intensive materials. The other thing to note is typical composites. So again, carbon fiber, fiberglass, or Kevlar, often made with resins that cause cancer or off gas. And we're here in California, lots of regulations, as everyone knows, and so just to operate, we have to really consider that. But that was also kind of early days for us. We wanted to make a product that's composite, but also clean and green. So it has doesn't have the VOC problem typically found in carbon fiber, or famous analogy would be something like surfboard manufacturing, where you go into the shop and it smells really strong of styrene and really unhealthy, and someone's laying up fiber and resin. This is way cleaner. In fact, we started our manufacturing in San Francisco, to give you an idea of that. So we really had a lot of constraints there being in California, and it was good because we wanted to be clean and green from the beginning. So we had to make this process something that we could do in the heart of California effectively, which is downtown San Francisco initially. Now we've moved to, let's say, more accommodating pastures, but we've retained that idea of clean and green. And so this is that's a long way to say that this really started from the world of composites, but now is entirely something new.
Mm-hmm. And it's you're addressing all the different steps of the life cycle. A lot of times people think about the how much resources were something dug out of the ground, but you've a lot of energy you're displacing in the production and also the safety of everybody along the way, in the manufacturing plant, in the fabrication plant, and in the home or wherever the final destination is. You're making all of their lives easier with, reducing the need for all of that protective gear and everything that you would need to use a full epoxy and all of the more toxic chemicals in fiberglass and some of these other materials.
That's exactly right. And that's a great way to put it, right? This is a holistic approach. And if you start with the end of the life cycle, really what we're looking for is something that maybe ultimately could be buried in the ground and we wouldn't be worried about it, thereby kind of continuing to sequester carbon. And if it has to be incinerated, that it doesn't release toxic chemicals in the world. And so from the end point, the end of life perspective, we have to consider the chemistry. And that's a no-brainer, but so many products out there, most products out there aren't really thinking that whole cradle to cradle approach. And everyone's suffering along that continuum. So we figure if we can provide solution, our Ekoa solution in this case, but natural composites, in general, that is performing like the expectation, but without chemicals of concern, that is a huge win for everyone, as you suggested, that's touching the product, from the factory manufacturer, our operators here at Lingrove in our factory making the product, to the installer, to the homeowner or commercial application, and then to the waste stream. What I will say is we have endeavored to make our product circular, so it can be recycled, and that is a plausible thing given our inputs. And that's another important thing about chemistry, is you keep it simple. New ingredients that have value as a recycled product, and that's really key for us. And then the other key thing is, because this is really a high performance approach to materials, and a class of materials that are used for aviation, for incredible supercars and things like that. We do want to build product that has a long shelf life. Can be an heirloom. And that's a really, people joke with me, I love that word, but really, best kind of sustainability is something that can last a while.
Yeah, well, everybody wants mid-century furniture because that's the last time that they made furniture that was supposed to be handed down to generations. Shortly after that, disposable became a thing, and it's just not the same anymore. And it's funny, you brought up performance a couple times, and it reminds me of I think it was Buckminster Fuller that said it, when the best way to stop something that's a bad idea isn't to work against it, but to come up with a better idea that makes it obsolete. And I think that sometimes the whole sustainable culture is do it because it's the right thing, and oh, by the way, it works, as opposed to here's something that's better than the way we were doing it, and oh, by the way, it's sustainable. And I feel like that is the key to success. And it really kind of makes me think of, back in your history of working with Ferrari, and you must have come around that same kind of mentality there, where you need to come up with something that's better than the competition. And I was wondering if maybe you could touch on that a little bit to talk about how it fed into your whole ideal.
Yeah, so I did really have an incredible formative work experience in Italy, 20 or so years ago now, to date myself, early in my design career. And that brand has high performance in its DNA, clearly. And, you look up high performance and, it's like their supercars and their sports cars are the kind of quintessential example, right? Unrelenting so. Enzo Ferrari was, there was no daylight between, race cars and the street car development. He wanted everything to be about performance and racing first. And that single-minded approach to product development, where you've set such hard constraints, has a purity, and the outcome shows it, right? And so what I learned at Ferrari is that when you have world-beating product, and that, and then you attach a brand to it, right? Nothing super novel about those two concepts, but when you have those two things, the brand and the high performance that is the DNA of that brand, then you have people like offering you tens of millions of dollars to use their tires on your sports car, on their race cars, in the case of Ferrari. And in the case of Lingrove, making it analogous to like an F1 car may sound strange, but we have the same concept that if you have a product that beats out the normal incumbent products, so let's say like something as mundane as a cabinet, which is one application of our Ekoa wood without trees, our replacer to be kind of extracted materials. High performance cabinet is one, that lasts longer, that might be lighter, easier to deploy, that has commercial level resiliency, and does all of that with natural materials that look like, familiar, let's say, biophilia, which we consider performance too, right? Ferraris are beautiful. Our product has to be beautiful too. And all of that with by the way, it's clean and green. That kind of approach where, that you were alluding to, and that has been really my career to date, can't be, I think, overstated, right? We can't expect people to just say, I'm going to buy this more expensive, call it a cabinet, because it's sustainable, but it doesn't look the part. And, I'm worried about its long-term resiliency. So coming at these set of problems from high performance Formula One approach has that purity of design that leads to a world-beating product, right, in the end. And then therefore you can attach it to a brand. Lots of companies have done this amazingly well, cliched examples beyond Ferrari. I mean, I would put Apple in that category. Of course, some of the electric car companies, which we have many now, which is great. And so it's now becoming kind of the way to do it. And it's just been really hard to do it in architecture and kind of the materials that make up our world. And so, that's been the long road for Lingrove. And, we're able to kind of get across the other end, but that's for probably later in our conversation. Suffice to say that, we took the ideas of high performance composites from Ferrari and the brand ideas, and then just use fast growing plants instead. And, the only thing about saying just is it took us a long time to develop that.
Right. And a step along the way was musical instruments, right? With Blackbird guitars.
Yeah. So exactly. So Blackbird started with the kind of Formula One influenced design, where it's one sort of piece, the body, neck, and head of this acoustic instrument is one piece, all hollow. So same as a unibody structure used in F1. And then to pull off that unibody structure, we had to use composites. And initially, we used carbon fiber because Ekoa didn't exist. And then, I had a eureka moment where we did a life cycle assessment. So effectively looked at carbon fiber and all the processes used to make the instruments. And what we realized was a very sad day for me that carbon fiber was worse from a carbon footprint perspective than old growth rainforest wood. So the 500-year-old, 1,000-year-old trees we have down the road here in Muir Woods, cutting those down from a carbon perspective was less impactful than using carbon fiber. And so that's the moment I knew, and this was over, maybe 2008, so 15 years ago, was the moment I knew we had to figure out something different for the guitars. And I'd been living a lie effectively. And so, we'd made a few, I guess, a couple thousand guitars at that point. We made a quick switch over. Actually took us 5 years, so not that quick. But over that period of time, again, having those really limited constraints. So it had to sound good, it had to look good, had to have the performance, which means like strength to weight ratios and nerdy stuff like that, of old growth wood. Density, so the little energy we got from the strings had to be translated to sound maximally. And what we were able to do is beat not only our carbon fiber, which meant sound production was bigger, more frequency range, so notes low to high, more frequency response, so more dynamics, so quieter, but you could play louder, than carbon, and also the old growth wood. And the product looked pretty good too. So with all that, we got a lot of people excited, and that started a long journey for Lingrove to figure out ways to scale that technology out of niche products, out of craft production, which is being musical instruments effectively, into something that didn't have constraints, didn't have an excuse for adoption. And, that's a whole other story, but this was an education in me for composites, certainly, but also manufacturing, and kind of the way of the world is really, if you can't scale, if you can't do mass production and mass produce something of high quality at a competitive price, all the do-gooder mentality doesn't take you very far. So we learned that a lot. I learned that lesson very well through Blackbird, right? We made a high-performance musical instrument, initially ukulele and then guitars, phased out the carbon fiber. And what we heard from the market was, here you have something that reminds us of wood, but is better. And that model, that basic sort of business model, is the foundation of how we developed our Ekoa product for Lingrove, and expect adoption to be based on those fundamentals of having a product that customer will compare and say, oh, I want to pick that. Yeah, that's the high performance. That's the one I can trust, and doing it at a cost, at a price. That's really the key to mass adoption. And I learned that through Blackbird. I learned that through Ferrari, and another startup I worked at called La, first employee there, now a very large food company. And they, again, performance and price, scalability, they do edible oils, as well as a brand that attaches it all together. So, hopefully through those analogies, the idea makes sense. I think it's, we have people like Rivian and Tesla today showing this idea in the car industry. And now, even my old company, Ferrari, is starting to follow suit. And so we want to do the same thing for the materials that build our world. So for architecture materials and eventually for all materials that build our world.
Ooh. You have one of your guitars there by any chance?
So I left Blackbird as the CEO or the founder back in 2018, when we spun off Lingrove and incorporated and got our first investor money for the effectively architectural scale up of what we were doing for guitars. But this is the Savoy model from Blackbird, named after a region in France. So got some family there. Actually, my family is there right now, and it's where the wood used to make Stradivarius came from, the old Kingdom of Savoia. So known in Italy now as Piemonte. On the French side, it's Savoy. And the trick with the Stradivarius is that spruce that they used was just unbelievably high performance. And you go around to that region now, there isn't a single old tree. So that's where the idea of Savoy is sort of imbued in this as a, kind of a, let's say, an ode to the long gone spruce that was made famous by Stradivarius, effectively.
You're talking about the naming background of the Savoy, and it reminded me of the root of your whole product line, based on the Ekoa wood for the ukuleles, which I thought was another unique ode to the geographic area that the instruments came from in the first place. So
musical instruments really, we really in that field, we're really fetishizing wood, right? To overuse a term, and it is what that means is the more rare it is, the more sought after it is, the more people will pay for it, and without getting too extreme about it, the more a poacher, for instance, would be willing to make an incursion in the forest, which in English would be a path. And before there's a road, there's a path, right? And then the path goes to the big tree, and they cut the big tree, pull the big tree out, and then you go from the path to a road. This kind of prized wood is often what drives that first path, right? Not always, right? But these are this is the known entryway into tropical forests, places like in Hawaii where koa wood comes from, and koa wood, which is a very figured, so has a lot of patterns and stuff, is endangered, and there just isn't very much of it left because it's been used for musical instruments, also for furniture, and I think before that for building. And so when we're looking for a name for our product, and when you come up with something completely new, it's actually pretty hard to name a product. We thought, okay, well, what is a wood that really gets people crazy with desire? And for us, it's all about generating desire. We want them to desire our better, more eco-friendly product. Little secret, that's really what industrial design is about. It's getting people to desire something they might otherwise consider a commodity or not even know they needed. And so for us, koa is a great, really gets your attention kind of wood, beautiful, rich, deep, and textured and all that. And so that was the influence for the name and also for the initial product. So yeah, we say Ekoa, a combination of eco and koa. And then, in other parts of the world, we might say Ekoa, which has a little bit nice ring to it as well. And for now, Ekoa is everything we make. We have Ekoa in different colors, but I do like the idea of paying an homage to these incredible plants, that some of which grow, 350 feet tall, and that are, such a key part of our ecosystem, the lungs of the world. But frankly, I just think are so beautiful, in all forms. And so honoring that and taking that bit of the natural world that makes wood so special to people and imbuing our products with it authentically, we think with natural fibers, is kind of the angle there. So I might have just made it a little bit more commercial than it needed to be, but just suffice it to say, yeah, there's a lot of inspiration out there in the world of natural materials, and Ekoa just got us aligned as a company early on.
So Ekoa itself isn't wood; it's a composite fiber, like we've been talking about, and primarily you're using flax and bio-based epoxies, right?
Today, actually, we're using flax and bio-based thermoplastics. So thermoplastics being the other class of plastics for the rest of the world that are recyclable. Epoxies are very difficult to recycle, rarely recycled, and cleaner chemistry. And lower cost, and frankly, good enough for what we're doing, right? Very high performance where the fiber is giving all the strength anyways. So yeah, and then we use on the matrix side. On the fiber side, the product comes from flax, which is being grown for millennia. Ancient Egyptians used it to make sails and ropes, and it's actually the foundation of the first, mercantile culture there. So it's been high performance for millennia. It's kind of a good way to look at it. And we picked flax because it's really high performance. Again, strength to weight ratio has been the focus. In fact, we can use fibers of all kinds and sorts, and intend to widen that input on both sides, on the fiber side, on the resin side, as the company grows. But yeah, today it's effectively flax and rapidly renewable based plastics.
Cool. And the flax has a lot of other benefits as well. The single growing season gives you all the fiber you need, as opposed to waiting for a tree to grow. It's carbon sequestering in its process. And I love the idea of taking a plant and making a durable good out of it, because that way the carbon that's been sequestered stays sequestered, as opposed to some of the other things where, you make food out of it, or a burnable product or whatever, and you're releasing the carbon back out and not keeping it locked up. And I know that a lot of times flax is grown just for the seeds, and the plant itself and the part that you're using is normally considered waste. And one of my things I always say is, in the natural world, there is no such thing as waste. And we need to stop using the word and start thinking about how the things that we're currently paying somebody to haul away can turn into feedstock for something else. And you've already done that.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate the kind of orientation around the sustainable story for flax. It is one of those poster child rapidly renewable plants, right? Indeed, we grow the fiber in a matter of a couple 3 months, versus old growth wood, which is hundreds of years, and even just regular wood. It is CO2 from farm to gate, and the fibers are effectively what they call a residue in the field. So this is the case of Canada. Most of the flax is grown, as you suggested, for the seeds. So we use flax seeds for making oil, my past life, and for making paints and finishes. And Canada grows enough flax for Lingrove to be a huge company as far as supply chain, but leaves the fiber in the stock and leaves that in the field or burns it, which, as we were just discussing, sends it back up in the atmosphere. And so, there's a lot of talk of different ways to solve the carbon pollution problem. But the panel here, this has ag residue, so that waste product that's normally burnt in the core, we can use it for our fibers, and that's how we get to CO2 negative. We have, sequestered the carbon through photosynthesis and then stored it long term in an architectural application or something like that, infrastructure, and doing it with materials that are normally burnt and put up in the atmosphere, and that. That's physics that work, and we can scale that solution to the kind of volumes that would actually move the needle. The built environment, just the materials we use to build the environment, to build our world is about a quarter of CO2 emissions, and by our reckoning, all of that can be replaced by rapidly renewables. That moves the needle, right? That's sequestering, billions of tons of carbon at that point. So for us, the key is having a skin, the structural skin, which is, again, not wood, but made from these fast-growing plants, that can enable a core that is also from fast growing plants that would normally not be strong enough. And then you end up with a panel. And then, eventually we believe that our platform, and we call it a platform because we can bring all these fibers in and all these resins in. We believe our Ekoa platform is, it's practical to use even like water hyacinth, which is found commonly all through Asia and is an invasive species. So imagine that, right? You're clearing out the waterways and then you're storing that carbon. And we've tested these things successfully. So it's really, really an exciting approach to, utilizing what would be normally burnt, utilizing ag as a solution versus a problem. And then, ultimately, and this is really where it gets blue skies. Yeah, we have a lot of agricultural land, perhaps too much, a lot of it used for animals. And most of it's used for animals, right? So some of that degraded land would be a great candidate for rewilding, but also for growing our futures effectively, being the place where, we can use these kind of cover crops, these crops that can remediate land, and grow our future with rapidly renewables on degraded land. And that's another area where I see a lot of opportunity. Obviously, we have to be careful about food crops. We have to be careful about deforestation. This is a big systems level problem, but that's what we would like to see in the future is residue being, so the waste product in the field being used to build architecture, and eventually the degraded land used in, for ranching effectively, some of that to be rewilded or Silvio pasture, and looking at ways to kind of reclaim that as sequestering land. So that's really where I think about how big of a scale this sort of solution could be, because every region on the world in Earth has the fibers, well, maybe not Antarctica, but has the fibers and plants we use to make our bioplastics readily available. We don't have to transport them. So it's just about plugging in big ag with these new high performance technologies so that we can start utilizing this. As you said, it's not waste, it's residue. We can use this residue.
You touched on so many things there. I'm having trouble getting my head around just one of them, but the idea of the farmland, it doesn't even need to displace the farmland. It could just be put in as a crop rotation and would serve as a way to help remediate the soil that's been compromised by the monocropping over the years and years, to put the deeper roots of a flax or a hemp into rotation to help bring the soil back to life while producing something instead of just being literally just a cover crop. So you've got the bonus there, and all that extra matter you're talking about in the core of your product there. If you could hold that up again for a second. And I want to point out to people that are listening, we are going to be putting this video and some photos of Joe's products up on sustainabilitynow.global on the show notes page, so you can see this stuff for real. But basically, it's like a surfboard or even sheetrock, where there's something in the core that wouldn't be able to serve on its own, surrounded by a skin that gives it its structure and rigidity, like the fiberglass on a surfboard over top of the styrofoam core, but you're doing it with plant matter. And that is just genius. It's a natural alternative to things that we've been using for years.
Yeah, it is. And, it's funny. It's this kind of engineering stuff, we're often removed from it, but many people have a hollow core door in their house, and those come in various levels of quality, let's say, but they're a sandwich panel, right? They've got, in many cases, and, don't be horrified to find out, but in many cases, we're talking about, it's mostly by volume hardboard honeycomb.
Yeah.
Talk about a, low cost, low weight solution. Now, we think we can make structures like that with high performance skins that beat out wood. And that's a nuance. But yeah, I did touch on a lot of things. And going back to the agricultural thing, we're all still learning what to do about sustainability. It's, this is early days. We know that agriculture is a big part of the solution, right? And I'm not a farmer. I'm not going to I'm not an expert on, cultivation. And so that's why we've been bringing in, big players in agriculture as part of our, let's say, partnership, so that we're not looking at this from a, optimistic, or, I shouldn't say optimistic. I want to be optimistic. We're not looking at it from a, point of view, a vantage point that we're not understanding the kind of systems level problem here. But indeed, when I talked about degraded land, we don't need to go there yet, right? There's plenty of land used for growing plants, and flax, as unsexy as it sounds, is actually a vegetable, and a rotational crop, cover crop, doesn't use a lot of nitrogen. So it is perfect to drop in the existing kind of cycle. But at the end of the day, these kind of big problems, they need to be solved in partnership. And so kind of that big tent of including the agriculture is key to Lingrove and how we're looking at this. And we're doing that on the high performance composite side as well.
Can you give some more examples of the kinds of things that can be made from Ekoa in the interior design space? Because I think it will help paint a picture in people's heads. This isn't just, sandwich panel, but it's things that can be replaced with Ekoa.
Yeah. Let me actually share my screen here. And
we'll paint a verbal picture for the folks just listening on the podcast. But remember, you can go to the website to see it for real.
Yeah, so I'll do my best description here. So our main kind of approach today is to work on walls, cabinetry, and then eventually flooring. And so this is an image of walls and effectively a drop ceiling made with a similar panel. These are very large, part of a 50, kind of 12 by 18 foot long panel system put together in a installed in a local application here in the Bay Area. So customer of ours, basically what we're showing is we can have a product that can be used throughout the interior, replacing things like laminate, wood veneers, panels, with a product that looks natural, right? That looks not like fake wood, looks like something different, something new that is bringing the natural world in. And that's really popular these days. So we're lucky to have that kind of tailwind. And it's also important to note that, for people who can see that this is the natural kind of au naturel finish, no added color, but we do have a mandate. Again, if we want everyone to adopt our product, we have to give them a lot of different versions. So we do have different versions that are more evocative of different kinds of woods.
And from here, it looks just like wood. I mean, the parallel strands, they look like wood grain. When you get up really close, you start to see that it's parallel strands, but it is, it's very wood-like, I think I would describe it as.
Yeah, and it, that's actually an interesting, touchy subject when it comes to design, because we don't want to be fake. We want to be our own thing. And so as we grow, the expectation is, because we have so many variables we can play with, from the translucency of the products, we can actually show light through it, and interface, but also color. We can show color through it, so behind the fibers, and without adding any color. And then, it's a textile, so we can play with textures, and it gets really fun. But ultimately, we expect to be able to duplicate many, many different kinds of finishes and create our own, or for some customers, maybe deserving customers, create what they want as a finish.
And I think you touched on something there briefly. The translucent nature of it really opens the door to so many things beyond, the ability to do functionality with the translucent natures, but also just the depth of how it looks. If it's translucent and there's a different color behind it, you can get that kind of the old automotive finish where they put layers and layers on, or the shellac that they used to do in ancient Japan that gave you a richness that is unachievable without that depth of the substrate.
When we talk about the challenges of sustainable materials, sustainable products, biomaterials, this kind of class, one of the fundamental problems with these products in this class is, to me, is historically been, here's our brown plastic. We've injection molded into something. Please buy our brown plastic. So no one wants to buy your brown plastic. They want to buy something that the lizard brain responds to and says, wow, that's awesome. And we know what that stuff is, and it's subsurface scattering. It's the back of the iPhone, right? It's the depth of the material. And so we really, really worked on that a long time. And having that in-material finish that is curated is one of the key differentiators. It's those little details that make all the difference. So, what I could say is that as we look to sort of how we can grow and change as a company and our products or whatever, it's going to be about like nuances, like does it have a rough or smooth finish or open pore finish? Because that's really where you get adoption from designers. So finish is really is so critical. Having to add a finish to wood, for instance, is really laborious, right? So it adds a lot of cost. And then many times you're compromising the whole eco story because you've added a finish to it. So many things that we buy and are, wherever it might be, Home Depot, IKEA, etc. There's this finish added. And so it started its life as wood or even car interiors, but then it's been Frankenwood. It's been reprocessed, coated. And so we're trying to get rid of all of that all in one fell swoop and have our product have a finish incorporated for most applications. And doing that well is really that's what took a long time. The years that I was talking about earlier, one whole year to make product, it looked really good, but it wasn't resilient enough. That took a year of development because making it look good took a couple of years. And then so once it got there, we're like, oh, we've arrived. No, it looks great. It looks like it's resilient, but then we had to figure out an in-material finish. And these are the nerdy things that separate, biomaterial dreams from the reality of the market adopting what you're doing.
And the other bonus factor of it being translucent is some of the things that you're doing, which kind of blow my mind because it looks like wood, but it behaves entirely differently with some of the touch controls and other things that you've been able to pull off. If you could describe those a little bit for us.
Yeah, and we'll definitely send over a video that you could put on the website as well. Probably we'll have the YouTube link with it complete with commercials, but these are some quick videos that show what we can, how we can leverage the innate translucency of the product. So we build our product additively, right? So it's layers of bio-based, plant-based resins, plant-based fibers, none of which come from wood, and then other plant-based layers. And at the end of that, we have our structural skin. It's not even a millimeter thick. It's less than a 16th of an inch thick. Closer to a 32nd of an inch thick for those imperial lovers out there. And because of the way we make it, light can shine through. It's transparent for interface, so capacitive touch, and interaction is basically impossible. And doing that with wood requires some serious fancy footwork, making it really thin, and so of course some plastics allow for this, but then you have plastic. So having a product that can have an interface for, let's say, wayfinding and architecture, or buttons in a car interior that has a very easy to interface with large buttons when you need them, proximity sensing, et cetera, and then disappear when you don't, is an exciting tool. And that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning or earlier, which is, it's not enough for sustainable, dreams, hopes and dreams in this space of manufacturing and product development to have that, the story be based on, just what's good for the environment. So in addition to making it really just plain sexy, right? Like, this is something I want because it looks really cool and reminds me of, natural grain finish. Having a yet another wow where we can incorporate electronics is key for that, adoption curves, because we could do things that you can't do with other materials and still retain the natural finish. When you want to introduce something in the market and you're just a Me Too product or just a sustainable product, I think it's too hard to compete when you don't have major differentiators. So early on, it had been we made a priority to emphasize this, what we call Ekoa Interactive, because the reactions we got from people were, here we are, you don't have to cut trees down anymore, and CO2 negative inputs and all this stuff we thought people would be, plus it's stronger than steel, lighter than carbon fiber. Everyone loves that, but it doesn't. Those are features, right? Having this kind of interactive aspect gets the kind of wow going, and then you trigger that lizard brain again, and people just get really excited about, how suddenly you don't need to look at all these buttons everywhere. And so we're getting a lot of adoption from architects and from the auto industry, frankly, for this natural yet technology enabled surface. But you simply can't do it with natural materials typically.
It starts to feel like some sort of voodoo magic, where this wooden steering wheel now has when I get up on it, there's some buttons I can use to control the volume of my radio or answer a phone call or something. And it feels like, wow, how did that even happen? Because nobody's ever seen it before. So you're definitely onto something that takes you away from the crowd of just being another veneer.
Yeah, and I can't help myself being a product developer by trade. One of my very close friends and also investor, Arvind Gupta, who was at IDEO forever, and I worked in the design fields too. He used to describe that, or he still describes that as you use the word wow. The two wows. The first wow that you see from a distance, in the case of a product like ours, it's not tiny scale, right? It's not. It's not my earbuds here. We're talking about something that's pretty large scale. First of all, as you see this whole thing, oh, cool, that's nice, that's beautiful, elegant, big splash of natural wood, like aesthetic finish that you would find, you'd see it on exteriors, you see it in interiors. It's a great accent. And then you have a second wow when you get closer and you engage with Ekoa Interactive when you're touching buttons. That is the key, right? Because that is what blows people's minds.
So before we wrap up, I wanted to ask what our listeners can do to help you be successful.
Great. Well, we love engaging with projects. So if a listener has an application, that's as described today. So think, walls, cabinetry, flooring, built-ins. We're excited to connect. We have, partners that we work with that can help make those a reality. And since, we just started manufacturing at scale earlier this year, we're excited to start reaching far and wide and getting Ekoa out there, getting the word out there. And so that's always a challenge for early stage companies. And so definitely excited to hear about projects. Other than that, we're an early stage company. We're growing, and so if there are listeners out there that are in the kind of startup space on any kind of anywhere in the continuum, we're always interested in kind of speaking with folks and building that community, seeing collectively how we can forge new paths, looking at ways to decarbonize. We think that we need lots of solutions here. So we want to be sort of at the forefront of that and speak to like-minded people that are, looking to scale and impact in a large way.
Or even partners who have an idea to produce something that could use your finish on it.
Exactly. Yeah, we have applications that range from anything from moving interiors, so think RVs and trains and so on, to modular construction to furniture. So it's quite a remarkable range. Simply put, like today, because eventually we want to be the side of a building, but today we're focused on interiors, and so think about any application that you might find wood or laminate today, and love to talk to you.
RV interiors is something I hadn't thought of, but it's so much a no-brainer. As soon as you said it, I'm like, aha, because it needs to be light. You don't want to weigh your vehicle down putting wood paneling inside of it. You definitely want to be doing something light and durable. So it's a perfect application there.
I know we're cutting this. We're pretty much done, but you mentioned Buckminster Fuller, and he would argue, and his proteges, I think, would argue that we should consider making everything lighter. Mm-hmm. These simple constraints like that are, I think, can drive a huge difference. So, yes, for RVs, also for modular construction, because it turns out the shipping weight for modular is where it gets really difficult. So, good plug for Bucky here at the end. Maxian and et cetera, right? Norman Foster, his protege, has been carrying the torch forward with lightweight architecture, and we're excited to be part of that story too.
Awesome. Great. Any other parting words before we go?
Well, Norman, if you're listening to this, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to sharing your story with the world and getting more people involved. And as we always say, that when we all work together, we can shape a world that works.
Thank you for listening to Sustainability Now. Visit sustainabilitynow.global to find resources related to today's program. While you're there, pledge your support by making a contribution to help us shape a world that works. And remember to subscribe, share, and follow us on social media.